bid for 10. 3 bid for 10. I kept saying it over and over in my mind like a mantra. This was going to be my first trade from the floor of the American Stock Exchange, and I was scared to death that I was going to screw it up, that I wasn't going to be able to hack it as a trader. These are some of the opening words in Martin Schwartz's book, Pitbull, Lessons from Wall Street's Champion Day Trader.
We had a kaleidoscope where you would shake it up and you'd look through it and you'd see a different pattern every time. And that's the challenge of the market to me, because it's not static. It's always evolving.
It's a book IG clients rated in the top 10 of the most important trading books to them. Welcome to IG Trading the Markets. I'm Sarah Walker, and I'm delighted to say we're joined from the US by Martin Schwartz, or Buzzy, as known to many in the market. Thanks very much for joining us, Martin.
My pleasure.
When you started writing your book, what was it you hoped to achieve?
Well, the motivation was to leave a legacy. I had been very ill in 1990 and almost died from viral pericarditis. I had pneumonia. In addition, my mother's father emigrated from Russia in 1903, and he kept a journal, which when he passed away, my mother had reproduced and bound for each one of the grandchildren. So as a result, I wanted to leave some sort of record of having been here. So that was my motivation.
And it's an amazing record. It's such a interesting insight into trading. There are parts where you smile, where you laugh. There's also quite a few parts where I have to say my heart was in my mouth to a certain extent. I mean, Black Friday is a perfect example of that, where you were running the losses and you're just thinking, how's he going to get out of this?
Yeah, well, volatility went up, so that helped me with the mistakes I had made. On that day, on Black Friday, followed by Black Monday, the market was down, I think, 108 points, which was, I believe, a record at that time. And I thought it was related to option expiration that Friday. So I took a chance thinking they would go up the following Monday, but it wasn't to be. But the real lesson from that experience was I took my losses and got my head clear to make the money back in the next several weeks, which I was able to do. And that's the real key to trading. I was thinking about some of the speeches I've given through the years, and one of the big lessons is that I became successful when I was able to divorce my ego from the trade and take a loss. Well, I'm trying to write another book. It's not coming quite as easily, called Addicted to the Game, which links gambling, trading, and horse racing all in one. And basically, I think all of the emotions that go into trading and gambling, seeking an endorphin high of winning, are across boundaries. And I'm trying to get that on paper now. But
well, it's interesting you say that, because actually that comes through a lot in this one, because obviously you started with the cards. You had the horses. They came back later on in your career as well at one point, didn't they, as well?
Yeah.
And that addiction, I think a few people talked about the addiction, you were described as having the fever. The doctor said it was like being an alcoholic. And that addiction really comes through the competitions that you had to win, how you had to then beat Porky later on. Did you at the time view it as an addiction? Do you think trading is an addiction? Could you have stopped?
Yes, I definitely do. Fortunately, I don't have any destructive tendencies other than trading. I've tried to imitate Icarus a few times and fly close to the sun, where my positions were too large, and I almost lost my wings. I came very close a couple times.
Yeah, I mean...
I've taken huge losses. my wife will often say to me, "Why in God's name do you do this? It's so stupid. You already won the battle. You have enough money to live this life and the next." And it's the thrill.
But even when
I
you
think
were
it's
in hospital, do you know what I mean? When, you talk about the fact that you were reassessing and the important things. Was there not a stage where you thought, actually, that thrill is not worth it?
I think the thrill overpowers it. I started writing. I wrote in the springtime, and I was writing some episodes the last few days, and they were about gambling experiences and how difficult it is to substitute that kind of thrill. I'm mathematically oriented, and I like scientific principles. And when I was younger, my grandfather, who I referred to, had a few cottages on the shore in Connecticut, and we were on Long Island Sound. And I was always struck, you would always watch the tides in the summertime when I was a youngster, and you would see a high tide and a low tide, much like in mathematics, a sine curve, where you go from high to low to high to low, and it's very similar to principles with the tides. And that was one of the things I looked for in trading. I called it green light, red light, where you come to a stop and then you go forward or you go in reverse. The same thing's true in trading. Now, one of the other principles I like to discuss is what I call the sunspot theory, and I think this is reflective in people's behavior. I always say I'm good 92 to 95% of the time, but occasionally I do stupid things.
Don't we all?
Emotionally. Yeah, well, that's the common denominator, and emotion will override intellect. And you'll ask yourself after, why did I let that occur?
You say in the book, you said, I was smart, I had a good education, so why wasn't I making any money on the markets? And I think that thinking, that view of people's own confidence, you mentioned ego at the beginning, is one of the issues, isn't it, in regards to people who go into trading? They think because they're smart.
I think you have to ask yourself the question whether you really want to win. I think people that are drug addicted escape, and they know what the ephemeral high will be, and despite the fact they know it's destroying their lives, they still do it anyhow. And I think the same thing is true in trading, that people who lose can wallow in self-pity, and they know how that feels already. And I think it takes great courage to be successful, because you have to remove the negative influences that you're accustomed to experiencing. And most people succeed by learning to handle their defeats. The other thing that's helped me in trading very much is that when the market fell apart in this may be the opening to the new book, fell apart in February of 2018, I lost a great deal of money. I was short volatility, and I was selling premium, and I was short 14,000 put options. And the irony is I keep a running P&L on my sheet through my clerk. He'll have it on the computer, and I'll ask him, so at about 10:15, the market opened 45 minutes, I was up $100,000. And shortly thereafter, as the market turned down, that was the day the Dow went down 1,500 points, I think closed down 1,000 or 1,100 points. And I went out to grab a sandwich at 12:15 and left my house to pick up some food. And I was talking to him on the cell phone, and I just said, because of the experience I had and the fear of getting really crushed, I just sensed something. It was a sixth sense of experience, almost like an animal prior to an earthquake. They say that the animals sense it before the vibrations in the earth. I had them cover all 14,000 options, and I lost $25 million. And I bought the
just saying that
between 2 and 3.
How does that make you feel when I lost $25 million?
It's sort of surrealistic. You feel embarrassed and stupid that you put yourself in that position. But the story goes on. I bought the put options between $2 and $3. I called them. It's not that easy to buy 14,000. I said, just cover the entire position. And for the next hour and a half, as the market kept going down, I kept calling to make sure the trades had cleared in the system, to make sure that I was flat and I had taken the bullet. And that's probably the thing that's made me successful.
During the book, you talk about the fact when you were doing well that you say, I wasn't trading differently, I was trading smarter. And you describe it like a chess game and making moves on the board. Is that for you? I suppose that comes back to having that plan as well, and one of the most important things for you when trading?
Well, in my book, I showed a copy of the sheet I would do each day, and I'm still doing it every night. I feel like preparation is critical because for instance, I had an experience a couple weeks ago where I got hit and I was vulnerable. I had a position on, and one of the advisory services that I've read for 40 years came out with a negative opinion, and it caused me to just sort of trigger me at my weakest point. So I took my positions off and took a loss, and had I not touched it, I would have been fine. So that relates back to sunspot theory. I've always kept myself isolated while I trade. I only talk to a few people during the day because I don't want any extraneous inputs coming into my brain or life. And I found that by doing the sheet every night where you've done a lot of calculations and a lot of numbers, at your weakest moments emotionally during the day, if you can refer down to your sheet levels that you've written or things that you've thought about the night before, it's extremely helpful, because the biggest risk you take is being influenced by outside factors that can cause you to make an error. It's convenient to be able to blame somebody else, but
just like, you mean like when you blamed your wife for going out shopping for a mink? You mean like that?
Well, she looked very good in it. At that time, she used to come to the office with me. I think it was before we had children, and when she went out shopping, I recall I didn't have a good day, so she was the person, or she is the person I bounce things off of.
Well, she was the person who sat down and wrote your goals out. She's the one who you talk about the fact that she was the one who kept saying, you've got a plan, stick to it. And that is one of the things, we constantly telling traders, have this plan. But equally in that plan, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. And you mentioned your book. You talk about green lights, red lights, reversing. And I think the analogy you use of that gear stick, and that you can't shift directions, reverse to first without going through neutral. And, that's such a great lesson. And that neutral, of course, being that time to stop and to think.
Well, it's what I referred to, what I did this past weekend. After the loss I'd taken a few weeks ago, I sort of was just making a little 20% of it back last week, and I felt that I was burnt out, so I figured I needed a rest, and so I had no positions on this weekend, And I think that taking that sort of tact is very helpful because you get a chance to refresh and think. And when you have a position, you're sort of rooting for it to work out, or hoping. I don't like hope, because hope is not a good trading technique. You need to have conviction, more letters than the 4 letters. But
well, you do say that if you're not convinced you can win, you shouldn't climb into the ring.
Well, I think sometimes it's good to stay in the corner for a minute and let the trainer ice down your sore eye.
And I mean, I think one of the things that traders, and you talk about it again, is realizing that I think how you put it, that according to the US Corps, even a retreat can be an offensive move because you're saving yourself for another day. And I think that's
Correct.
one of the things that we often find, that traders, that they feel that they have to keep riding it because they can't be proved wrong, or they don't want to be seen as making the wrong decision, so they stick with it. And that's an important lesson, isn't it?
I think that's divorcing your ego from the trade that you have to learn. The retreating many times has helped me save the bacon, so to speak. I've had a couple of, not only have I had at least one brush with death, but also I've had a couple of brushes since I've been successful with, really getting crushed. In 2015, when the Chinese devalued the yuan in August, I got really hammered. It was very similar to the 1987 thing. The market was down quite a bit on option expiration, and I came in with positions that were totally wrong, and I had to scramble all day. And I didn't leave the house for 3 days. I was so devastated by it.
Which leads me
to go on a.
Yeah, I was just saying.
Pardon?
I was just saying that you say it's those moments when the true strength, I suppose, comes out, and the true intelligence in trading comes out. You say that in one of the chapters, every trader faces it. Only the winners know how to handle it, and it being that losing streak or the losing trades, and knowing how to get back in the ring, I suppose, and handle those.
Well, what happened to me in 2015 was I started believing my own stuff. I was having a record year, and a friend of mine, my friend Danny, who was my clerk in Chicago for a number of years, he begged me to take half the money out of my account, and I said, "No, I'm doing too well." And I ended up losing it because I took my eye off the ball. So it relates back to the sunspot theory. It's very hard to be good all the time. It's hard to be good 100% of the time. So I think the things that have saved me are experience. The real quandary that I'm still always asking myself is, why do you keep doing it at this point in life? And this is a deeper question. I feel like giving up trading is a form of death, because I'm not quite sure what to do to replace it. And I know a lot of people are like that. I mean, Danny, my friend,
doesn't that go back to that addiction? Doesn't it go back to that kind of addiction that people don't know what they would do, how to replace it?
Exactly. Yeah, equivocal. But Danny was my friend, who was my clerk. He subsequently moved down here about 5 years ago, and I talk to him every day because he's a street guy like I am. He never got to go to college. I got to go to the best schools in the country, but because I was fortunate. But having the street smarts is very helpful. And he was telling me a story because he's known a lot of traders through the years. And he said, there's one guy, he doesn't know what to do with himself. Not me, someone else who's not doing quite as well. And he says his wife keeps screaming at him, and it's stressing their marriage because he keeps losing. And she says, I want you to shut your trading account. And I think it's that fear of not knowing what else to do that you feel a sense of loss. I mean, I own a lot of race horses, and there's the old joke, when a horse gets loose, he doesn't run away. He or she doesn't run away. He or she runs back to the barn. So I think, every day I get up, come down, turn on the computers, and look at the machines and try to figure out what the news of the day is and what's going to occur.
Do you ever wonder? Do you ever think, what would you have done if you didn't kind of succeed? If that day when you'd gone onto the floor of the American Stock Exchange and you hadn't succeeded, or you hadn't held your nerve over the next couple of days?
My wife always said to me, she gave me the confidence to take a chance. My wife said, your education's not going to change. You can always go back to being a security analyst. The only problem is, for the 20-odd years after I went on the American Stock Exchange, I kept waking up with nightmares thinking I had another research report due.
In your book, you talk about other books that you read along the way and that served you well. Obviously, this book was written a while ago. What would your top 3 trading books be now, do you feel, that if someone came to you and said, I'm looking to get into trading, where do I start? What would your top trading books be, do you feel?
Well, you have to start with mine, obviously. But
obviously.
Obviously. I haven't read Peter Lynch's book, but I think he was quite brilliant. And the other book that I loved was one that I feel a great deal of honor to be included with, is the Edwin Lafay book. I think that book has stood the test of time, and I hope mine does to some degree.
Well, the fact that we're here talking about it today tells you it has stood the test of time, when you do have new traders coming in, new analysts coming in who view your book as one of the most important. And on that note, we have to wrap it up. So I want to end with a quote from the book. It's actually a quote from your wife. All traders are the same. You want to buy at the low, sell at the high, do it 3 times as large, and quit at the top. Martin Schwartz, thanks very much for joining us.